time for one last look at 1994 as we cast an eye over the lower formulae to see who to look out for in days to come. British Formula 3. There really was only one name in British Formula 3 this year, and it was Jan Magnussen. The Dane absolutely dominated the year with Paul Stewart Racing, winning 14 races of the expanded 18-race season, with West Surrey Racing's distant second-place man Vincent Rademacher and Dario Franchitti and Riccardo Rosset won each, as they finished just a point apart in 4th and 5th places. With points now awarded down to 10th place, 21 of the 25 drivers who contested at least one race in Class A got on the scoresheet. In Class B it was a similar story, with Duncan Verco best in class 13 times in the 14 races he started, with Gray Headley just about staying in touch with one class win and a run of points finishes. Of note among the various future F1 drivers was Christian Horner of Fortec Motorsport and Zach Brown of Mark Bailey Racing in Class B, neither coming away with a lot to show for their efforts. The same two nationalities also topped British Formula Ford 1600. These same two nationalities topped British Formula Ford 1600, with Jason Watt, or possibly Jason Watt I suppose if he's Danish, taking the title after a season-long scrap with Geoffrey Orion, with Justin Keane keeping the Union Jack flying in third. British Formula 2. The rebranded domestic F3000 series continued to struggle on, with so few entries that 3 of the planned 10 races had to be abandoned due to not enough cars. When racing did happen, it turned out to be fairly evenly matched, with Argentine Jose Luis de Palma of Madgwick Racing taking the crown by just 4 points from Apache Racing's Phil Andrews. These two took 2 wins apiece, with the other 3 going to Mexican Gianfranco Canet, Brit Gareth Rees and Italian Christian Pescatori, each winning the only race they entered. Some drivers from India were also beginning to appear on the British scene, with Akbar Ibrahim's sole entry in British F2 the first by an Indian at that level in the UK, while in Formula Ford, Narain Karthikeyan picked up 21 points to come in 13th overall. German Formula 3. The German F3 series saw a relative old-timer, 25-year-old Jürg Müller, take the title after winning individual races in previous years. A switch from Bongers Motorsport to Helmut Marko's RSM team with Fiat engines came too late to save his 1993 season, but in 94 he proved difficult to beat, taking 11 wins out of 19 rounds, and leaving second-placed Austrian Alexander Wurz trailing in his wake, although Wurz did pick up a string of podium places to make it all look closer than it really was. In third place was one Ralf Schumacher, taking a single win at the Allemannen-Ring, but also following in Big Brother's footsteps by being disqualified in one of the 4 Hockenheim rounds. Austrian Philipp Peter won 1 race, but Argentine Norberto Fontana also made an impression by winning 3, 2 of which were from pole in a double header at the Nürburgring. Unreliability meant he couldn't finish higher than 6th, but one to watch for the future. French Formula 3. With none of its contenders going on to F1, I haven't actually been able to find a single photo of a French F3 car from this year, so have one from 1995 instead. As usual, it was a distinctly Gallic affair, won by Jean-Philippe Belloc in his second year in the series, taking 5 victories out of 11 for the Winfield Racing Schools team, beating the 2 Prometechne drivers Christophe Tinceau and David Dussault into second and third. Nobody able to mount one strong single challenge to Belloc, although Tinceau was particularly impressive on the streets of Po. Italian Formula 3. It was a similar story in Italy, where ton double-header races saw Giancarlo Fisichella in his 3rd year in the category switch from Jolly Club to RC Motorsport and instantly reap the rewards with 11 wins and 11 poles, while no one else could manage to put together enough of a run to challenge him. Once again, the series was almost all Italian, though 2 raced under the flag of San Marino, with Argentine Gaston Mazzacane the only one not from the peninsula to trouble the scorers. Masters of F3. Now, I haven't mentioned this one before, but 1994 was the 4th running of the Masters of Formula 3 race at Zandvoort, intended to be a sort of European Macau, a showcase for the best F3 drivers that was run in August. The inaugural race in 1991 had been won by David Coulthard, in 1992 by the all-conquering Pedro Lamy, and in 1993 a very popular local win for Jos Verstappen, so it certainly had a pedigree, and so far 2 winners had come from German F3 and 1 from the British series, so there was some pressure on the Brits to redress the balance. German F3 frontrunner Müller took pole, but second-placed Gareth Rees of Alan Docking Racing made the better start and controlled the race all the way to the flag, followed by Müller and his fellow countryman Sascha Marson, who started and finished 3rd. Rees had yet to get a win on the board in British F3 at the time, and indeed this would remain his only win of the season, though he still managed to come in third overall in his domestic series. Japanese Formula 3000. In the last couple of years, Japanese F3000 had gone from being a bit of a backwater to a proving ground for F1 talent, with Eddie Irvine, Heinz-Harald Frentzen and most recently Mika Salo among the non-Japanese talent to make the move. The 1994 series was a close-run affair between Italian Marco Apicella, still hoping to return to F1 after his one-corner-long stint with Jordan last year, and Andrew Gilbert Scott, the Brit who had become something of a fixture in the series, as had American Ross Cheever. Those three, along with the two Japanese drivers, Takuya Kurosawa, no relation to the movie director as far as I know, and Naoki Hattori, and Italian Mauro Martini, hoovered up most of the points between them. Interestingly, although he impressed many people on his debut at Suzuka, Mika Salo had barely featured in Japanese F3000 this year. In an interesting echo of Formula 1, the title was decided in the final round at Suzuka when Apicella and Gilbert Scott collided at the first corner. International F3000. The F3000 series was contested over 8 rounds, and for 1994 the calendar was juggled so that more of the races, 4 of them, would take place as F1 support races, helping not only with the visibility of the series, but also allowing some networking for the drivers. Round 1 was Silverstone, and saw Frank Lagorce start the season as he'd finished 1993, with a win after moving from Dams to Appomattox. Second was David Coulthard, with Gilles de Ferran third, and Sosbury, Noda and Cottas making up the points, though it would turn out to be Coulthard's only race of the season, as shortly afterwards he was called upon to fill the very big shoes of Ayrton Senna. Coulthard was replaced at Vortex Motorsport for the next round by fellow Scot Alan McNish, but he failed to finish, and after that the Dutch team decided that maybe 3 cars was too many and dropped one. That second race on the streets of Po was won by Gilles de Ferran, with Vincenzo Sosbury second and de Ferran's Paul Stewart Racing teammate Cottas third, a good day for the Scottish team. And for France, as 3 more home drivers, Jean-Christophe Bouillon, Frank Lagorce and Guillaume Gomez picked up the rest of the points. Next up was Barcelona in May, the first of 4 F1 support races, and there was a slightly surprising winner in the shape of Massimiliano Papis, who'd had 3 lower points finishes in 1993 for Vortex, but had moved back to Italy to join Mythos Racing, to no avail so far. He was followed home by his Mythos teammate Fabrizio Di Simone, with Sosbury making it an all-Italian podium. In fourth was home driver Jordi Genet, recently given a testing berth at Benetton, with Lagorce and Belgian Mark Goosens, Genet's teammate at Nordic Racing, taking the remaining points. That gave de Ferran, Lagorce and Sosbury 13 points apiece as they headed to Enna-Pergusa for round 4, and Gilles de Ferran became the first man to win twice, followed home by pole sitter Lagorce, with Hideki Noda becoming the first Japanese driver to take an F3000 podium, with Papis 4th and Policon and Pescatori both opening their points accounts. Lagorce replied with a second win of his own at a packed Hockenheim support race in round 5, as Papis came a cropper tangling with Forte Corse's Brazilian driver Pedro Diniz, leaving Bouillon to come in second with de Ferran third, making the gap at the top 2 points with 3 rounds to go, and it looked very much like the title race was going to be between Frank and Gilles, as Vincenzo Sosbury had now dropped back to 12 points off the lead. Belgians Mark Goossens and Wim Eijkmans in his privateer entry might have hoped for great things at Spa, as the F3000 gang once again played support to the big boys, but although Lagorce was on pole again, the Dams team were finally getting their act together, and it was Jean-Christophe Bouillon who took the lead after a stunning overtake at Blanchimont, so I am assured, I haven't seen it, and when the Appomattox team misjudged the weather and brought Lagorce in for slicks while it was still raining, Frank could only trail in 13th, while de Ferran had started from the pit lane and clawed his way back to 5th, as Bouillon celebrated his maiden F3000 win. All of which put Jules, as Jean-Christophe Bouillon was universally known, up to 3rd, with Lagorce and de Ferran now neck and neck again on 28 points each. And so to Estoril for the last of the 4 F1 support races, and a bit of an unknown quantity as F3000 had never been there before, and most drivers were unfamiliar with the circuit, though de Ferran had raced Formula Vauxhall Lotus there and tested a footwork F1 car at the circuit. Lagorce's Appomattox teammate Emmanuel Clerico, who had otherwise barely featured, took pole with de Ferran alongside, then Bouillon and Lagorce back in 6th. De Ferran took the lead at the start, but was punted off by Clerico, which seemed to give Lagorce the advantage as Bouillon took over the lead. But Frank made a rare mistake to chuck it into the gravel, so no points for either of the leaders, as Bouillon cruised home to end the day just a point behind the pair of them, while Vincenzo Sospiri was still in with a shout 6 points off the top, despite driving with a broken hand at Estoril. And so it all came down to the big showdown at Magny-Cours, the home base of the Appomattox team, and on a track he knew well, Lagos dominated, fastest in every practice session and on pole for the race, with Bouillon alongside, while De Ferran could only manage 11th and Sospiri 16th. And when Fabrizio Di Simone clattered into the Brazilian at the start, it really was down to the two Frenchmen, though Sospiri put on a valiant effort. Frank and Jules duked it out for 8 laps, until a tiny mistake by Lagos let Bouillon through, and he never looked back, taking his third win on the trot and bagging the F3000 title in one of the most astonishing came-out-of-nowhere stories in recent years. Lagos had to make do with second, and the 2-year Ligier test and reserve contract that followed, but as Simon Arron put it in Motorsport magazine, such was the lump in Frank's throat at the post-race press conference as he tried to put a brave face on it, that he looked like he'd swallowed an orange whole. France, the only country to have state support for its young drivers through the Volant Elf scheme, had now taken 4 F3000 titles in the last 6 years, and the last 2 on the trot, while the Dams team had 18 race wins and 3 titles to its name. No other team had more than 1. With every champion since the creation of F3000 in 1985 having made it to F1 shortly afterwards, Bouillon's name was suddenly on everyone's lips, but he refused to be drawn himself. Most thought he would spearhead Dams's planned foray into F1, probably now delayed until 1996. And as usual, the season rounded off with the Formula 3 race at Macau, which this year was marred by the death of motorbike rider Katsuhiro Tottori in the MotoGP race the day before the F3 Grand Prix. The Macau first-timer thrown over a concrete barrier after crashing on the start-finish straight. 3 other motorcyclists were also hospitalised during the same event: Ken Watson of Australia, Akihiro Yamada of Japan, and Brit Dave Leach, so it was perhaps with slightly less of a party atmosphere than usual that the F3 and F3000 boys assembled for their race. There was a strong German contingent, with Helmut Marko's team taking their F3 champion Jörg Müller and Portuguese former child singer Pedro Cruzeiro, GM Motorsport taking German F3 runner-up Alexander Wurz and Arndt Meyer, and Willi Weber's WTS team running Ralf Schumacher and veteran Sascha Marsen. The Works Volkswagen team were there too, with Max Angelelli, one of 4 Italians in the race, with Thomas Biaggi and his self-entered Dallara, and Italian F3 champion Giancarlo Fisichella, paired with Roberto Colciago. And the usual major British F3 teams were in attendance too. Paul Stewart Racing putting up their winning combination of Magnussen and Franchitti, West Surrey Racing pairing Rademacher with Kelvin Burt, and Alan Docking picking 2 of their 4 drivers, Gareth Rees and Stephen Watson. There doesn't seem to be a lot of information online about how the race actually went, and much as I love you all, I'm not taking out a monthly subscription to the South China Morning Post just to read one 31-year-old article. Sascha Marsen took pole for leg 1, but came in second to Giancarlo Fisichella, with Burt third, but the Italian crashed out with 10 laps to go in the second heat, leaving Jan Magnussen to take the win, with Marsen second again, the story of his career in many ways, only this time it meant he took the event win on aggregate, with Burt third again, which likewise took him to second overall, and Magnussen third. There had been a huge pile-up at Lisboa during the second heat too, but fortunately given the context of the weekend, there were no serious injuries. And that's it for 1994. I hope you'll join me as we head into 1995, though, as you may have spotted, I've got a bit of a cold coming on, so I might have to take a bit of a break before I do any more recordings. I'll keep you posted. In the meantime, I'm just experimenting again with the idea of doing some merch, so let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in, what kind of thing you might like. It's not going to be anything fancy, just a print-on-demand job with the channel logo and maybe a selection of those pixel art helmets I use on the grid rundowns. See you in 1995, whenever that actually happens.